Well, good morning, everyone, and a big warm welcome to Introduction to NVIVO workshop this morning with Dr. Robert Lingard. This is the first of a three-part series on NVIVO that'll be running every Thursday. So I'll pop some links for next week's workshops in the chat as we go along. We are recording, and others might be watching at home on our YouTube channel. And I encourage you to become a member of the Postgraduate Association, and in that way keep all these workshops free for students all year. Yeah, so I'll post a few links, and it's all yours, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm sitting in Bundjalung land at the moment, born and bred here, beautiful country, and I pay my respects to the Bundjalung Nation and to the work that they've done as stewards of this land over many, many, many generations. It's lovely to be here today. Look, I'll also give an endorsement to the Postgraduate Association. I've been involved with them since I was a student way back when. They really provide a great service, so I thoroughly recommend that you support the Postgrad Association. They provide excellent service, and they're a really nice bunch of people anyhow. But that's not why we're here. Today we're going to have a look at NVIVO. Now, I see already on the list there are some people who could probably be running this session themselves, Natalie. So some of you will I realize are quite advanced in your usage of NVIVO. Others are probably still questioning, what is this thing about? So I'm just going to ask, in the chat, could you just put in a little note? What level are you studying at? Are you postgrad? Are you undergrad, honours, masters, PhD, something else? Are you new to NVIVO, or do you have some familiarity about that? So do you mind just putting something in the chat? Just so we can see a little bit about the group that we've got today. Okay, new to NVIVO, just starting out, yes. So we've got a range of studies, masters and PhDs. I believe we might have some honours students coming in today as well. Definitely need a refresher. Okay, so Juliet's got some familiarity as well. PhD is previously rather rusty. Yes, and the nice thing about NVIVO is it's continually being updated and new things added. And the NVIVO community makes input to the Lumivero company and says, this is what we need updating, or a new facility that we require. Okay, thank you. So we've got quite a range of experience here. This is going to be a bit of an introductory session. We'll go into greater depth in the practicalities next week when we look at how you can employ NVIVO to add rigor to your literature review. And then the week after that, we'll look at thematic analysis and the way that we can structure our coding and our approach to analysis. So that'll be an introduction to an actual coding project. Next week, we'll be integrating EndNote and NVIVO, and hopefully you'll find that useful. Today, we'll have a look at some of the functions that are available in NVIVO and give you some tips and tricks for starting off. So, press the right button. Here we go. What the session is. So I'd like to warn people about what we're going to try and achieve, and also that's quite often defined by what we're not going to do. So we're not going to go into huge detail with all the intricacies and functions of NVIVO. Now, that would take quite a number of hours to go through it all. There is a lot of detail. A lot of it is, well, it's all useful, but it will also depend on the context of your research project, which functions you need, which functions you might not need. So we're not going to go into the details and how all the logistics work together, but to give you an overview so that when you look at the project, you know what's happening and you've got a bit of an idea of how to proceed. And in particular, I want to give an idea of how it might be useful for you. Even for those who are very much quantitative researchers, NVIVO can still be a very helpful tool, even though it's designed specifically for qualitative research. So this isn't a detailed instruction on your research project and how it can be translated into NVIVO, but we'll look at some of the tools. I'll signpost some of the critical moments in the research and opportunity to talk about some resources that might be helpful. So it really is going to be an overview today. Please, at any time, interrupt me. If I'm caught up in the flow of something and not realizing that you've put your hand up electronically, just turn on your microphone and interrupt me. That will be okay. I realize sometimes things I say in my head are really clear, and when they come out of my mouth, they don't make much sense to those who are listening. So please, if I need to explain something or give more detail or reword it, let me know so you can maximize the benefit that you get from this session. The disclaimer is that I'm a practitioner, not an expert. I've been playing with NVIVO since about 2010. I had a project looking at government documents and submissions from the public to government. So I was playing with over 1,500 documents. In one part of my documentation, there was 1,035 documents, and I was really struggling balancing all of this and juggling it using Excel. So discovered NVIVO. I've worked with this in quite a lot of other projects since, and have been involved with students who have been struggling to translate their project usefully into NVIVO so that they were able to make sense of their data and their analysis. I really like NVIVO. It's something that's helped me with my data management. As I said, I had 1,035 documents in one set. I could be confident with my Excel spreadsheet. I had 1,034 or maybe 1,036. But until I came across NVIVO, I could never be confident I had the 1,035 exactly where they needed to be. So it can deal with large volumes of data and keep it all ordered and classified and sorted for you. It also simplifies the coding process, so you're not playing with sticky notes or highlighters. Those sorts of things you can do electronically, but it's all tracked. The big advantage I find for NVIVO is that it connects everything, or at least everything you want connected, it can make the connections for you. I was in discussion with a colleague a number of years back who was skeptical of NVIVO, saying that it was actually just pulling everything apart and it was breaking things apart, whereas his approach to research was that things should be being connected. My argument is that NVIVO actually connects things. So you can make links between the person who said this and an effect that you see and this other document that was over here that's also been created as part of what you are investigating. So it will link everything together and help you keep track of that. It's also useful for helping you with transcription, and I'll have a brief look at that later. Transcription is one of those very difficult and potentially tedious activities that we engage in some of our research. But it's able to assist with that, as well as there's a transcription service through NVIVO that you can access at a cost, the same as you might access another service somewhere else. Excuse me. Analysis is aided by visualizations, plus you can create memos. So you can have your notebook that sits on your desk and you write your notes and reflections in, or you can open memos, different pages and documents in NVIVO, and keep all of your research documentation and field notes and personal reflections together inside the one project. So it's actually quite a comprehensive piece of software that we're working with. Research decisions can be recorded, code books can be made, so that all of the steps of your research can be kept together. Now, one of the things that you will be asked about when you open a new project is, do you want to record every keystroke that you make when you're working in NVIVO? So really, it can keep a very, very, very detailed record of what you are doing in your research project. I recommend against ticking that box when you start a new project, because if you record every keystroke, then you are very quickly going to fill up the available storage on your computer. If you have a particular research project specifically requiring that every keystroke is recorded, then fine, you've got that facility, but don't tick that box when you open it unless you're absolutely certain. So research rigor is also something that can be supported by NVIVO, to the point where your supervisor can question you about the decisions that you came to, or the reasons that you used for doing X, Y, and Z in your research analysis. You are able to show them your NVIVO project, and if you've structured it correctly, and it's all about structure, if you've structured it correctly, then any audit of your research is easy. You can go through, say, look, this is what I did in step A, this is what I did in step B, and this is what was found at this level, and at the next level, this is what came about. So it also serves that purpose for you. Now, are there any questions yet? As I said, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. Oh, I shall proceed, but please interrupt when you need to. So what is NVIVO? I've spoken a lot about it without introducing it. Okay, it comes under the class of a cactus. It's a computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software. It was originally developed, I believe, up here on the far north coast of New South Wales. There was an academic here at the university who personally knew the couple who started NVIVO. Way back when it was started, it was called Nudist. This is a nice bit of trivia. Even the people at Lumivero aren't aware of this anymore. NVIVO was started off as Nudist, and I forget what all the NUDIST stood for. But apparently it's because the couple who started it lived out in the country and were nudists. So there's the inside goss, secondhand, of course. It's since developed an awful lot since then, adding new functions, new capabilities. So according to Lumivero, which is now the company that owns it, it's easy to use collaborative qualitative analysis software, allowing researchers to import, organize, explore, connect, collaborate on their data. So it's a very useful piece of data, part of a class of software that is useful for research. Now, if you're doing statistical work, then you'll be using something like SPSS. But if you are doing qualitative work, then NVIVO is the piece of software that you need to be familiar with and need to be using. Now, I've said that it's very much qualitative as opposed to quantitative in its application. But I make the appeal to the quantitative researchers or to the mixed methods researchers that this is still a useful piece of software for you for your overall research project, in so much as all of your documents can be kept in one place. Now, for some of us, it's important that we keep all our correspondence with High Degrees Research Office all together in one place. You can set up a folder in NVIVO and with the memos and store everything there. You can gather all your literature together. So that's irrelevant of whether you're qualitative, quantitative, or otherwise. Storing all your literature together can be a very useful thing. As well, what I've said before, you've got your field notes, your reflections, supervisor meetings. All of those things can also be kept together and followed. And if it becomes necessary, you can go through and code them as well. Now, for some people, their research involves field notes, which they will go and code. So you can do all of that here in this project, within this software. Excuse me. Okay, still no questions. Now, I believe that you will have received an email suggesting that you have NVIVO downloaded to your computer, that you have it active? If so, you might want to open it and play with it. If you are opening it for the first time, it's going to ask you for your name. Now, that's important in so much as if more than one person engages with your project, then it can be handy to know who it is. So is your project being developed by yourself or someone else at which point in time? So I always put my initials RGL, and anything that I do gets recorded as RGL. And if for some reason someone else was involved in my research project, then they would come on and register with their initials. It's not useful in most cases, but it's there and can be useful. For those who engage with multiple coders or have a shared research project, then registering the different users will become very important, particularly if you look at the measure of intercoder reliability. But for some people, that's a whole new concept. Leave that for the future, but just tuck away in your head. NVIVO can handle more than one person accessing a program and being involved with it. Now, for some of you in your projects, that will be a useful thing. I'm thinking of particularly some of those who are taking their first steps in research, some of the honours projects. It may be useful for your supervisors to also have access to the project as a way of giving extra guidance. So speak to your supervisors about that, and just make note of who the different users are as you set up your projects. So once you've opened up a project in NVIVO, you're going to be confronted with a screen that is generally split into 3 parts. The column on the left is the navigation pane. So that's where the different parts of our project are stored and recorded for us. So this top part you can see here on my screen, we've got data. So the different files that we keep. So in there, I will keep my downloads from government web pages. I will include letters that have been sent into government inquiries. I will include the audio from interviews. I will include the transcripts from interviews and a whole range of other data types. Then there's the coding section, the cases, the notes, and if we scroll down the screen, there will be things like sets, where we can start to group things into different sets to make our access to them easier. And then there's reports and things that you'll find when you scroll down there further. Across the top, we've got our command ribbon. NVIVO has a lot of redundancy built into it, and I think it's one of its great strengths. So all these different functions along the top in the menu ribbon, or many of them, are reproduced just by right-clicking on the screen and seeing what drop-down menu comes up. So there are different ways to access different parts of the functionality of NVIVO. So its redundancy is actually a useful thing, and whether you like to move your mouse around or just right-click and do things like that, it's actually quite a useful tool and very flexible in the way that it's used. This is list view. This is where you will see a list of all the different types of data that you have, where you will find the cases. So if you are studying a range of schools in New South Wales and Queensland, then each school might be a separate case. Or it might be that you're interviewing 30 different people. So each of the people you interview will be a case. So they might appear here in this list as well. Or as you generate codes, so these different labels that you provide for pieces of your data, then that will also be listed here in this list view. Over on the right, you get your contents view. So in this case, there is a document that is open and active, and so we're able to read the content of that. Now, it might be, there's a whole range of other different content that could be there, and we will access, we'll talk about that as we proceed. Now, again, one of the advantages of this is that we're not restricted to everything being here on the one big screen. I can right-click on my document, Boost for Bushfire Recovery, and I can undock it and reopen it in another window. So that just adds to the ease of working with this. Are you sharing your screen as I can't see it? Okay, Lauren is asking that. Is anybody else not able to see my screen? If anyone's able to just give me a note. Okay, Natalie's able to see it. Okay, Lauren, I'm not sure what's happening there for you. I'm sorry. Okay, Lauren, I would say just check with your settings, or if you're really stuck, go out of this and come back in on the conversation and see if that makes a difference. I'm sorry, I'm not able to offer any more help than that. Oh, good. Okay, you've got it. Excellent. Okay, so I'm saying you can undock the contents and play with that on its individual screen, which can be quite useful. And if you're working with multiple screens, that's a really good, useful way to be able to operate. So, going to look at some of the data sources. Can I ask into the chat box, can you tell me what sort of data you are using or anticipate using? Now, clearly, one of the data sources that you can see on my screen at the moment is working with audio files and video files. So you can see here, there's the picture from a shot from the video screen, as well as along the top, you can see a representation of the audio file and even the transcript that's being developed. So what sort of interviews, audio files, loads of photos. Oh, that's interesting. Interview transcripts. Yes, I expect there'll be quite a few of them. And notes. Okay, notes is really important. Anything else? Anyone going for social media? Secondary data and primary data collected through interviews. Okay, yep, transcripts. Okay. Focus group transcripts. Okay, so there's some important things. Make sure that I talk about photos, and we're going to talk about making transcripts a little bit later. There's not going to be the detail, but I want to give you some pointers of what to look for. Voice clips, photos, transcripts. Yep, okay. So there's quite a range of data types being represented here in our group this morning. Okay. This is a representation of a video that's being imported into someone's project, or most likely, because it's video, it's going to be very bulky. It'll sit outside of the project, but be linked into it for analysis. Now, with this, it's possible to create a transcript. And as I said, I'll give you some pointers on that later. So we've got a transcript here, we've got text, we've got picture, we've got audio file. By moving the cursor around and indicating what we are wanting to look at, NVIVO is able to play the sound to us and link that with the text. So you can see above the audio file, there's this faint orange band that's been drawn. That band corresponds to about 10 seconds of speech, which corresponds to the pink, the orange highlighted text down east. I'd say Cedar Island, of course. That's where I always grew up. That's where I live at. So the text is highlighted and it shows us where on the audio file that is, or we can move which part of the audio file we're looking at, and a different bit of text will show up. In the same way, we can move through the video and look at the picture and see what corresponds there. So for some people, that will be very useful. For some people, they need to identify what is the interviewer doing at the time that these words are being spoken. So it may be useful to have that, that sort of functionality. in the software that you were using for your analysis. Some people will be interviewing surveys. I didn't see surveys come up on the data types that you've put in the chat box, but some may be going to use surveys. Surveys can be collected in a whole range of formats. Quite often here at Southern Cross University, we'll be using Qualtrics. So people will be sent to a Qualtrics survey, they will fill it in, the research will download a file of the responses. Those responses can then be imported into NVIVO. And at the same time, it's going to ask you some questions. So which questions are closed? Which are the questions that relate to the qualities of the survey of the respondent? So is this about their age or the state that they live in? Are they male, female, or non-binary? And then it's going to ask, and which are the textual responses? So where you've asked them to go in and write free text responses, NVIVO will pull those things apart for you and sort them as it imports the data sources. So it's very good in the things that it can do for you, and will simplify a lot of the steps of importing complicated and large data sets. Just keep checking every now and again in case there are questions coming in. Now, this is a really, really useful function. Capture for NVIVO. It's an add-on that you can get for NVIVO, and it'll sit on your, say, your Internet Explorer screen. What I've done with it is I've gone to the website for the Prime Minister's office, found the documents that were of interest to me, and said to Capture for NVIVO, please go and take the data from this website and save it for me. It saves it in a folder, and then I import it as a data source into my project. It has application in social media as well. So if you want to go and have a look at Facebook or somewhere else, then you can use the NVIVO's additional add-on, and it'll come and grab the information that you tell it to and keep it in all the conversation trees. So it'll preserve that hierarchy of the conversation for you so that you can get through it, then go into it and undertake your analysis. Here is a summary of the many different data types that you are able to import into NVIVO. I'm guessing everybody gets covered with all their different types of data sources. So you've got your standard, Word, Excel, that sort of thing, as well as a lot of social media, audio, and you can deal with video as well. Okay, everyone's being very quiet. If you would like, now, there are many transcription services available to researchers at a fee, plus there are different software applications available that can transcribe. Now, you've also got to watch out for, you have to ensure the ethical access to these transcription services and what information you are sharing with them, what they will do with it, what does it say regarding the confidentiality that you've promised to the interviewees, that sort of thing. So if you can use a transcription service, pay for it, and that's useful and fits in with your methodology and your ethics, go for it. For those who want to take a different approach, personally, as tedious as it is, I reckon transcription's a really good way to go, in so much as it takes you deep into the text. You know what was being said. Word has a nice function to transcribe. Yes, there's quite a few quite a few transcription services and options. And as AI is developing, there are more and more of them too. But again, I say, check out what is happening to the information that you give them. What does it mean about the identities of the persons whose information is being transcribed as well? So think all those things through. If you opt for the self-transcription option, then you import your audio file into NVIVO. And when you open it, you get a window like this open up. Now you can see here on the screen, the orange at the top highlighted audio. So we've got these different audio functions available for us. There's an option there for setting the playback speed. So especially if you're a reasonable typist, you set this playback speed to the setting that works for you. Turn up the volume so that it works. And then you start typing in. Now, I should have also said, you set up how many columns you need. Times will be automatic, content will be automatic, but you might also want to set up a column for speaker as well. And then you go through and you tell it when you get to the end of a line, and it'll start a new line with a new time signature. Whether you want time signatures or not, doesn't matter, you can deal with that later. But you can use this as a way of transcribing. Now, I'm a reasonable typist once I get in the zone. I mean, I make lots of mistakes, but I find it takes me, if you need an indicator, 5 to 6 times as long to type as it takes to listen. So the warning is, if there is an hour interview, as a typist, it takes me 5 to 6 hours to type that. So it's tedious and it's time consuming. But by the end of it, I've got a pretty fair idea what was said. Now, that said, I then replay it and go through and edit. I then export it to Word and make sure that it looks really good and formatted. So it does take a lot of time, a lot of effort, but NVIVO helps me to do that. You just need to work out what's going to work for you. But we do have that function available. I should also say NVIVO also has its own transcription services. It's paid for. I think it's, on memory, it was at least about $50 for an hour's worth of transcription. Now, I know you can get more expensive and cheaper services, but also you've got to consider where the data goes. So take all that into consideration in consultation with your supervisors. Now, other questions. Natalie, agree it's tedious and time consuming, and you do have to go through a number of times. Yes. You do have a good understanding of your data after this process. Yeah, and look, for me, that's the most important thing. Diving deep into your data. Especially if you are engaged in qualitative research, you are engaging with rich data that comes from real people. And so engaging in this very human task of listening and typing and listening again and correcting, I think that's very consistent with our qualitative research. But again, look your methodology, speak to your supervisor, check your budget, and work out what's going to be the best option for you. Okay, when you are dealing with many types of data, and certainly if you're dealing with data from many different peoples, or as I said, you might be studying schools as different cases, or government departments. There's a whole range of different things that you might be studying as the central subject of your research. You then need to classify them as a way of sorting them through. Excuse me. This is an example of data taken from the exemplar that's given in NVIVO. So here we have a range of different data types and people, and looking at this thing called a person. So there were interviews conducted with individuals. They are being classed as person. And then they are given different attributes. So for this particular project, you'll see in the blue window under case properties that this interviewee called Barbara, who is classified as a person, has the attribute of living in a specific township. And that township has the value of straits. Now, there will be other attributes. So some will live in a township, some will live in a village or in a city, and then they will have different names or different values given to them. This person also has the attribute of community. Generations down east, so been there 2 generations, go to the bottom, easy one to understand. This person has the attribute of age group, and the value for this particular person called Barbara is ages 40 to 49. So each of the persons is described according to demographics and other characteristics relevant to the research. And so they are classified. At the end, it means we can pull out all the people from township straits who said a particular thing about the environmental impacts of the fishing industry from this research project. Or we can go through and find all the 40 to 49-year-olds who live in the township of straits. So once we've classified the things that we are studying, we're able to pull them out in groups according to the different characteristics that we've assigned to them. So to their different demographics, or in the language of NVIVO, according to their attributes and attribute values. It's a very useful function, can become a little bit complicated at times, but once it's all sorted out and all the allocations made, it will help you just tease apart the different parts of your data for a deeper analysis. Now, once you've got all your data sorted, imported all your different data types, and then worked out what the cases are that you're working with, you then go through and start this process of coding. So coding is identifying the pieces of data that satisfy your research criteria. So what are the concepts of importance? Now, you may come at your data with a pre-existing coding framework. So you might be working with a wonderful theory that's going to look at positive emotional responses. So you've had this list of 3 or 4 positive emotions that are clearly part of your framework. And so every time you see someone talking about joy or happiness or contentment, you go through and you highlight the bits of text that relate to those concepts. Alternatively, it may be that you've got a rough idea of the theoretical approach that you are taking, your research question. So you just go through and read it and see what are the things of importance that emerge out of the text. In which case you don't come with a predefined coding framework, but you come with an approach that allows the coding framework to emerge from what's actually there in your data, whether it's text, visual, or audio. So the idea is to go through, highlight the bits of text that are relevant, go to code selection, and then create a name for the new code. I think I've got that on the next screen. Here's some codes that have been created. So bits of text have been identified. Some have been called attitudes, some balance, some community change. Excuse me. If you have a look at economy is interesting here. Economy is a code. So there are bits of text or video or audio that have been identified as speaking to this issue of economy. When we look over here, we see that the number 25, so 5 different files now have this code of economy associated with them. And across those 25 files, there are 486 instances of economy being used. We can also see here from the plus that we can open that up and there are some subcodes under economy as well. So it might be things like business economy or international economy. So subcodes that also contribute to that. Now, when codes are being created, you assign a name, as we see here in this blue box, code properties. There is a name that is assigned. And then I recommend that you give it a description. Now, this will also depend on your approach to coding, and we'll talk about this a lot more in the third workshop when we look at thematic analysis. But if you work out your coding structure, what should each code contain or not contain, then you fill in the description, and then at the end of your project, you go through, press a couple of buttons, tell NVIVO, I want all the code property descriptions, and it will produce the code book for you automatically. You'll just pull out the name, pull out the description, line them all up, and then you've got your code book printed out. So it's worth thinking about the description. And even if you're not sure exactly, put some notes in there, because what you think at the time that you create something is not necessarily what you're going to remember in the future when you come back to it. So make some notes and develop them as you go along, and that will contribute to a code book which you can print off automatically at the conclusion. Just excuse me, it's going to cough. Sorry for that, Andrew. Are there any questions that you have for at the moment? Everybody's being very quiet, so either everything. Just trying to find where my cursor went. There we go. Oh, I'm hoping everyone's still there. I just glitched.
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay. Yeah, Zoom's just sent me a message. Okay, good. Everyone's still there?
Yeah.
One of the things to remember about coding is that codes can be structured in NVIVO. So it's very much like the data management application that you get in Windows. So you can create folders under codes and set up a coding structure. And again, this is something we'll go into in detail when we look at thematic analysis. But here I've got an example. I've created interview codes. I'm going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. And then I've got phase one coding. And if I was to open that up, there'd be a description about what I mean by phase one coding. In this case, I mean, phase one is about familiarization. So going through, reading all my documents, reading all my documents, going through and making notes, going through and writing a reflection memo at the end of it. So that I would consider that my phase one. Phase two is when I go through and I start looking for everything that would seem to be important for me. Now, whether I'm imposing a framework from on top or whether I'm just allowing things to emerge, doesn't matter. This will be my phase two. I can also be a little bit more nuanced. I can say, I've got two different theories that I'm working with here, or two different approaches, or two different parts of the project. So I can then go and break down my phase two so that I work it through in part one. So I apply theory A, and then separately, I'll go and apply theory B. So you can structure the steps of your analysis as well. And again, this will add to the auditability of your project. So if someone wants to come through and say, how did you get to this? You can show them how you went through step by step. When it comes to phase 3, my recommendation is that you copy all of the coding structure from theory A. So it will look like what we've got here on the previous page. Just go back to that. So here on the left, attitude, balance, community change, economy, infrastructure. I just copy all of that and paste it into phase 3. I would never go back to phase 2. It remains as it was. And now I will just work with phase 3. And so I can see what developments are taking place. So think about how you are going to structure your analysis, and NVIVO will support you in doing that as well. Now, one thing I should have included but didn't, and I remember that Mally was talking about using photos. When you import photos as data into your NVIVO project, what you can do is open up the project, open up the individual photo, and then draw a square around the thing that is of importance to you or something that you want to highlight. So if it was a letter, you would highlight a piece of the text. In this case, you highlight a piece of the graphic, and then you make a note about what that is. So you code chunks of the picture. So you code it more or less the same way that you would code text. And then you will still get that coding framework and that structure that you are then able to use and set alongside the text that you've also coded. So you can use your pictures, your video, your audio files the same way as you use your text and incorporate them into your analysis. Are there any other data questions or any other types of data that you've got a question about that might be usefully asked? Nope. If there is, just pop it in the chat box. Okay. There are some shortcuts that we are able to take with NVIVO. Now, I've just created this mock interview. Thank you, ChatGPT. Be careful with the use of generative AI in your project. Please constantly check policy standards as far as research writing goes. And check with your supervisors. They will be up to speed with what's happening, but it's an evolving field at the moment. So anyhow, generated this just as an example. So I had this interview. There's only 2 of us involved. If it was a focus group, there would be more persons' names, but the process would be the same. I want to know what are the things that Bill said. And I don't really want to know what it is that I said. I mean, I can refer back to it if I need context, but I want to pull out all the bits that my interviewee has said so that I can then go through and code all of that. So assuming that's useful for you in your research project, you open the interview, you then select auto code. What I've done here then is that I want to code this using speaker name. And then I hit next. And then from that, oops, sorry, went too far. From that, I say, okay, the first speaker to identify is RGL, so my initials. And I go through and highlights everything orange. Every time RGL appears and all the text below it until it comes to the next RGL. And then I go through, well, there's a second speaker, Bill. So I type in Bill's name. And then it goes through and sorts out everything that I've said down until it comes to the Bill. And then everything from Bill down until it comes to the next speaker. So in this way, it sorts out what I have said versus what someone else has said. Now, this will be especially helpful in a focus group where you've got multiple speakers. So you can tell it who the different speakers are. And as long as you have consistently spelt their names correctly throughout your transcript, it will go through and pull out the individual pieces of text for you that you can then go through and read and analyze and do what you need to. That is useful. But there's another step that I think you might find more useful, and it's something that needs to be done fairly early on in your transcript preparation. Quite often people come and say, I need some help with the analysis. And we have to backtrack a couple of steps to get this one in order because it just saves so much time and effort. My recommendation is once you have a transcript, whether you did it in NVIVO or somewhere else, drop it into Word and go through and set heading levels for each of the questions. Now, this doesn't work for an informal conversation, but for a structured or semi-structured interview, this is very, very useful. So what I've done is I've set the title as heading level 1 in Word. Then I've highlighted question 1 and I've set it as heading level 2. And I've gone down to question 2 and I've set it as heading level 2, and question 3 and question 4 and so on and so on. But I've also got sub-questions here. So I've got question 1 and then sub-question 1A. So I set it as heading level 3. And if I had a question 1B, it would also be heading level 3. Go through and do that in Word. Now, if you have multiple interviews or multiple focus groups, this becomes really useful. But it also becomes more important that you ensure that absolutely every title is exactly the same. So one full stop difference, and NVIVO won't see it as the same thing. So then you'll have to do some corrections. But once they are identical, again, use the automatic coding function. In this case, we say auto code, and we're going to use style or structure. And then the next window will ask us, so what sort of style or structure? We say we're going to do it on paragraph style, and we want to pull out heading levels 2 and 3. And then it will sort the parts of the interview for us into the questions. So here we've got a code tree that's been developed for us automatically. And I've said, okay, show me what question 1 looks like. And so all the text that was included as question 1 is put down here. Now, at the top, we see that this comes from the file interview with Bill. Now, if I had another 10 interviews and did this, then under interview Bill would come interview Susan, and then question 1. Then interview Jim, question 1 text. So then I can go through on the one piece of screen and say, these are all the bits of question 1. So that if I choose, I can just go through and code all of question 1 together. And I don't have to swap between all the different interviews themselves. They are all gathered here together under this code. So I say that NVIVO is tedious to set up. It actually takes a lot of work and quite a bit of conceptual work to get your head around. Once you do that, you can access these automatic functions that will just save you hours of work. Are there any questions at this point?
Yeah, can I ask something, Robert?
Yeah, of course.
So my semi-structured interviews have been a little bit more conversational, and I'm worried that my conversational prompts will not be equal, so they won't elicit the same sort of response.
Yep.
So I haven't thought of coding the questions in that manner. It would be disingenuous to go back and alter the questions so that they were identical in order to make analysis, wouldn't it?
In the way that you said, yes, I guess it would be. So I think there are 2 options for you, David.
Okay.
Depending on how structured the interview is, without altering the questions that are being asked, you can go through and add titles. You can go through your text and say, here is question 1. And then you go through and the next bit, you say, this is question 2. And maybe it was out of order. Maybe question 4 came next and then question 3. So you can go through and add these cues, assign the heading levels, and then go through and do the auto code. Now, if the conversation, the to and was it the back and forth, if it was not so clearly structured as that, and I've had to recommend this to some other researchers, then you have to take the longer approach, which is go through and highlight all the bits of conversation that relate to question 1 and code it to question 1. And it might be this top bit is question 1, and then down here's another little bit more of question 1. So you code this question 1, this is question 2, then you go back and code this as question 3. So that's the more tedious way to do it, but it might be necessary depending on how informal the discussion was.
Okay, thank you.
If is yours reasonably structured into question 1, question 2, question 3?
It very much depends on question 1's always the same, and then it very much depends on the response to question 1 as to quite where we go. And we always end in the same sort of place as well. But the structure of the interviews working with young people can be dependent on the direction that they're taking it.
Okay. Then either go through and identify all the bits of question 1, question 1A, question 1B, question 2, or go and insert labels, assign heading levels, and then use autocode.
Okay.
It will depend on the fluidity of that conversation, what's going to be most useful to you.
Would it, sorry to monopolize this a little bit, would it matter? I've used a deductive coding approach, so I'm looking for certain structures within the answers regardless of where they occur within my questions.
Oh, well, in that case, you might, okay. In that case, it may not matter at all whether question 1 was formally addressed or not. Quite often, people are asking for discrete sorts of information within each question. Therefore, it's useful to identify. If it's not useful to identify a question, then completely skip that step.
Okay. Okay.
So
thank you. It's really clear. Yeah.
Okay. If that helps, excellent.
Perfect. Yeah.
Anybody else with a question?
I have a question, please.
Hi, Thor.
With these auto codes, they run separately than the codes that will be used for the analysis. I'm kind of confused because I thought codes were for analysis, but these codes seem to be just a structural setting.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. These are more structural. Personally, I include these in my phase 1 approach to coding. So not actually identifying the bits of information relevant to my analysis as such, but providing the structure that's going to help my analysis later. So look, Brown and Clark, I think, provide a useful approach to coding. Now, their focus is thematic analysis, but I think their approach to steps in coding is useful. And step 1 is sort of sort out everything and get familiar with it. So I would include this sort of coding as phase 1 or outside of the coding analysis part anyhow. But yes, it will be a way of sorting your data as opposed to analyzing your data. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for raising that question. I realize I hadn't explained that so clearly. So use these functions. There's also a range coding function, which will just go through and you can tell it, I want to see paragraph, excuse me, I want you to go through and code my paragraphs. and it will go more on the structural sides of the appearance of the text. So there are some different functions there. It depends what's useful. But yes, this is not the same as going through and identifying key words or key concepts. Okay, Juliet's had to depart. Let's think through about how you set up. Yes, yes, the setup is definitely worth it. The way you set up saves time or uses up more time later. Okay, NVIVO also has capacity for creating visualization. We've got a range of different visualization types here that I've used in different projects. The ones with all the circles is a sociogram looking at how different codes are related to each other. And I set this up looking at the relationships between something which is causal, something which is empirical. So that was a useful set of code, a useful visualization for one set of research. The boxy looking one in the middle is looking at the proportion of the frequency of different codes within a project, which was then visualized as a word cloud. So a couple of word cloud functions. I've not found them to be overly useful. Again, it depends on your methodology and your research intentions. But as far as communicating research and adding a bit of sparkle to presentations, and it can be a useful thing to do. The bottom one is a visualization based on similarity between documents. This was important as part of the 1,000 or so documents I was working with government, was it submissions to government? So this was showing where there were similarities between documents. I found that some of the groups of people submitting documents were from the same social network or the same group of same social groupings. And so they were basically copying each other's documents and changing a few words. So that was able to be highlighted. Visualizations will be variably useful. Again, it depends on what you are trying to achieve, what you are trying to demonstrate, and is it something that is necessary for explaining your data, or is it something that's, I think, more about engaging the interests of the people you're presenting to. Okay. NVIVO is a very, very good piece of software. Setup is tedious and can be time consuming. As I've indicated, just going through transcripts and making sure that the questions are identically worded and formatted, that can take time. Making sure that you've got all of your classifications of all the demographics, for example, sorted, that can be quite tedious. In addition, if you are new to NVIVO, then it takes a little bit to get your head around. Now, to help with that, Alison is going to send out a document at the end of this that might be useful to you, just as a way of thinking through the different parts of your project and translating them into NVIVO language. Setup is tedious, but I really think that the payoffs are worth it. It will help to sort your data. It will help to show how things are related to each other. There was a project I was asked to assist with a number of years ago, and the student had gone off and done a whole lot of work within NVIVO. When I came to review it, I was able to see that the student had made a mistake. There was a misunderstanding about how data was related to each other. So the data was actually inside out. So results could have been found and an analysis could have followed, but it would have all been inside out and it would have actually been a nonsense. But because NVIVO was so structured, it was easy to identify what the problem was and to fix it. So having a structured approach to your analysis, to the data storage and to the analysis is really, really helpful. Now, you also need to be aware that some people have an Apple or a Mac disability. I found that quite a number of researchers favor Apples and Macs, especially those working in arts-related areas, but not always. So the NVIVO version of the Mac version of NVIVO doesn't have all the functionality of a PC version. It is likely that it can do everything you need it to do. And sometimes we might need to find some workarounds in order for it to work the way that you want. So just be aware, if you have the option, Mac versus PC, my recommendation is go for the PC. But if you are with Mac, you'll still find it can probably do everything you need it to do. One of the things that you will find it doesn't do dynamic sets. Now, a set is when you have, say you've imported 50 different interviews, and you've decided that these particular 23 interviews are the ones that I need to focus on. And the other interviews, they're going to tell me something else. So you create a set, and you can drop these 23 down into a set, and then you just open them up. You don't have to go through and sort through your big data list. They're in this set, you just go to that set, you find them automatically. However, you can also say, right, I've looked at my 50, interview number 1 here is really good, so I'm going to code it as XYZ. And the next useful one is also XYZ. So you code your 23 interviews as XYZ, and then you set up a dynamic code and a dynamic set. And the dynamic set has commands built into it that every time there's a file that is coded XYZ, it's automatically going to be pulled down into my dynamic set. So every time you discover a new XYZ file, it will be pulled down. And if you change its status so it's no longer XYZ, it'll be booted out. So the dynamic function is good, but it's not available in Mac at this time. So some of those options you won't have, but you'll still be able to, there'll be some other workarounds that you can use, even if it's not an automated system. Some of the multiple user functions aren't there as well, like the intercoder reliability isn't something that you'll be able to use easily in Mac. But I'm expecting for most of the projects that we're looking at within this group, that's not going to be an issue. But just be aware, sometimes you will find there is something that you're trying to do. Everyone's saying you can do it in NVIVO. Maybe you can't if you're working in Mac. So you just need to find a workaround for that. Any questions about that? Oh, here's a big comment. Now I'm writing up my data chapter. I'm very grateful for the advice for writing notes and memos, setting it up. Okay. Great tool for me for thematic analysis. Good to explain my process with supervisors as it's all organized. Oh, this is really good to hear. Thank you. Continually go back to my codes in NVIVO through the write-up. Thanks so much. Really great to hear that, Natalie. Natalie is someone who has spent time doing the tedious setup, getting all the details in place, and also applying memos as part of her process. So the idea is you create memos in NVIVO, use that for your field notes, use that for your reflections. You can go back to it, and as I've said too, store supervisory minutes of supervisor meetings, that sort of thing as well. So all of the project is kept in one place, and then when you need bits of it, you can access it and manipulate it as you need to. And I mean manipulate in the positive research sense. Okay, here come the warnings. Thou shalt not let the software take the credit. So if you're doing the analysis, it's not because the software did the analysis for you. You did the analysis. In any applications or in any write-up, never say NVIVO did the analysis for me. No, it didn't. It was a tool that facilitated your analysis. It was the tool that helped you gain insight into your data, but the software didn't do the analysis. Now, there are some automatic functions in there and a little bit of AI built into it. It can go through and find keywords, just as general word search stuff goes. That's fine. It can go through and automatically code for sentiment. Some people find that useful. I've not found it useful in anything I've done. Doesn't mean it can't be helpful, but it also comes with a warning. I've also tested the sentiment auto coding, and there were some things that the AI, it didn't understand the subtlety of language, that what some person was saying, you know, it's not a bad thing. The AI completely misunderstood and gave it the opposite sentiment to what it should have had. So beware, and remember, you are the one who does the analysis, and anything that's done automatically, you actually need to check it yourself. Again, considering ethical considerations, don't allow the digital abstraction that NVIVO facilitates to minimize the humanity of the persons you are working with. So you have most likely engaged with real persons, and whether there are surveys or interviews, that sort of data gained, you are dealing with personal sharing from someone. So remember to always be respectful of that. It's sometimes can be easy to get caught up in the digitalization of everything that we're doing and forget that we are dealing with persons who deserve respect because they are human persons. Be careful not to inflate claims of rigor. Now, it's also possible to say, yes, I've used NVIVO, I've done this, this, and this, therefore I know it's all rigorous, you know, I know, wonderful. Yeah, okay. Go through and make sure that things are rigorously done. Make sure that you have carefully thought through the steps of your methods and then applied them. And where you're working with a supervisor or a team member, get them to check what you've done with them so that you can actually claim that there was rigor. And as I've indicated earlier, work on that structuring of your project and the coding structure and the structuring of the process. NVIVO has so many buttons that you can press and so many little graphics that you can create that you can also just get lost in all the doing. So be careful about that. Remain focused on what is your question, what is the type of data you are working with, what is the method that you are applying, and then make sure you keep that focus as well and don't go down too many rabbit holes. And also don't hide behind the black box. It's easy to say, yes, NVIVO did this. Yeah, okay, but you need to understand it as the researcher, what you did, and how you came to the conclusions using the functionality that you've engaged in NVIVO. Now, an additional consideration. At times, it may be useful to have someone else give some oversight in your project. I'm happy to give some advice on projects, but if you're going to engage someone outside your project to have a look at your data, then you need to ensure that your data is de-identified and that it is appropriate for someone external to have a look at your data. So just be aware of that and what the ethical implications are for your data and what's allowed within your ethics approval as well. Are there any questions on those points? Okay. How to get started? Okay. Remember, the supervisor is your friend. Even if your supervisor isn't up to speed with NVIVO, some aren't familiar with it. Some were familiar with it in a past incarnation and just need a little bit of upgrading. But either way, they still understand research methods, methodologies, theories, theory application. So they will still give you good guidance. So please make sure that you have a good relationship and good communication with your supervisors. If you're having trouble accessing NVIVO, then IT are really helpful. Make sure that you have it downloaded and that you have the activation key. So downloading is one thing, but it's also got to be activated. Understand your theoretical approach. What is the approach that you are taking? How is it going to shape what you do? Understand your method. What are the steps that are indicated? And then think about what is it that is important when it comes to considerations for coding. In this way, you are able to say, this is how I need to approach my research. These are the things I can do with my data. These are the concepts that are important, the ones I'm bringing in, and the ones that I'm looking for to emerge. Okay. Oh, now leads me to comment about supervisors. Not familiar with NVIVO, able to export my codes to Excel and share these with supervisors for feedback and discussion. Yeah, so they couldn't give the insight maybe for specifics of NVIVO, but they're still the research experts. And thank you for that reminder. Everything that you've got in NVIVO, you can export. Generally as an Excel spreadsheet. So you've got a coding structure, you can export it as an Excel spreadsheet. If you've got a graphic, you can export that as a graphic as well. So it can all be brought out into an environment that will be familiar to your supervisor or to others. Plus, you can zip through the different pages on NVIVO in a Zoom session or face-to-face and show them the bits that are needed. And they will understand the theory and the methods. So make sure you draw upon their expertise. Okay. Open your project, set it yes. It's going to ask you, do you want to update this every 15 minutes for it to be stored every 15 minutes? Click yes. It's really important. When I was starting out, it was super important because the projects weren't so stable. And every time I kicked the cord under my desk, the computer turned off and I lost the work I've been doing on the last 20 minutes. It's more stable than that now. NVIVO's moved on a long way since then. But that 15 minutes save is actually really, really helpful. It's annoying when you're in the middle of something, the screen comes up, do you want me to save? Just click yes and move on. I highly recommend that. Open NVIVO, import your data sources, sort them so that you create a folder. This is where my interviews go. This is where my surveys will go. This is where my photos will go. This is where my external literature is going to go. So create the folders, sort them out. Classify your sources so that you can identify that which is an interview, that which is a photo, so that those things can be pulled out individually and easily. Work out your coding structure and the steps that you are going to take for your coding. Follow method, apply, repeat, and ask for help as you need to along the way. Okay, I mentioned this at the beginning, I think. Alison is going to send out a document I've put together that I'm hopeful will be useful to you as you consider how does your particular project translate into NVIVO. NVIVO is a wonderful tool, but you sort of got to translate the ideas. So your project working with, talking to all these different peoples and using this data set here and this data set here, how does all of that fit together? So hopefully this sheet will help you. It asks, what are the things that you are studying? What are the types of things we call cases? What are their attributes or their demographics if we're talking about people? What are the data sources? So it asks you to think through those things and fill out on the form as a way of starting to sort out in your head which bits go where when I start to work in NVIVO. So hopefully you will find that useful. Okay, are there any other questions? Because I've sort of gone through all my content. I mean, I can make up stuff, but I prefer it with something useful.
I'm just interested how everybody went with those instructions to get NVIVO from SCU and to get the license. Did everyone manage okay? Yes, great. Already had it, haven't had the chance yet. Great. Okay.
Now, Lauren especially, and anyone similar to Lauren haven't had the chance yet. If you're going to come to either of the next two workshops, I thoroughly recommend that you download NVIVO. And it's not just a matter of download, it's download and then activate. So go through those two steps so that you can play along at home when we look at using NVIVO for your literature review. And then when we look at thematic analysis. Now, there'll be people here who aren't doing thematic analysis, they're doing something else. But I think you'll still find it helpful when we go through the details of coding, when we have a look at some of the tools for analysis. And I'm going to go through in more detail about structuring that coding process. So yeah, make sure you've got downloaded, activated, and play along at home. And so I should also say, for those coming to the literature review workshop, also have an EndNote file ready, where you've also got some PDFs saved alongside or saved within your EndNote file as well. So here's, literature Smith et al. 2022, and here's the PDF of that document. So make sure you've got an EndNote file as well as an activated NVIVO program. Some technical support. I know someone else recently who had to get some technical support. They found the IT department was helpful, but they did have to access them because things weren't working quite as they should.
Good to hear. Yeah, good to hear.
There are some other options. As we've advertised, the Postgrad Association is hosting Lit Review next week, and the week after that, we're looking at thematic analysis. There may be some other things that would be helpful. So just communicate what it is that you think would be useful. As well as the Postgrad Association has been really helpful in supporting students, and there have been some one-on-one workshops that have been available for the postgrads to help them translate their work into NVIVO. So if there are questions, my EndNote is large with lots of attachments. Is that okay, David? Perfect. That's exactly what we need, a real life situation. But even if you've only got, say, 10 references there and some with PDFs, that will be useful just so that we can demonstrate the functionality and how the two bits of software work together to help you with your literature review. Yes, and every year, yes, licenses need to be updated, but that's done fairly automatically. The university is always onto that for us.
Yeah.
Alison, unless there are more questions.
Okay, excellent. Very informative, very helpful. Yeah, really good to remember that generally we're dealing with human beings and not just coding bits of words. So yes, I have posted the links for next week's workshop. If you scroll back up the chat box, hope to see you all there. And also just one more thing before we wrap up is the Postgrad Association are having a lunch at Gold Coast campus next week. So if you're nearby, we would love to see you there. And I'll just post the date and everything for you in the chat. You're most welcome too, Robert, if you happen to be nearby Gold Coast campus. It's next Tuesday the 20th. Anyway, something for students on the Gold Coast.
Great.
Okay, everyone seems really happy. Lots of thank you. Hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.